Hi, I'm going to talk to you today about using your basal body temperature and your cervical mucus to track your fertility cycle throughout the month. So I'm going to start off by talking to you about basal body temperature and the averages, the norms, what you'd be looking for on your chart. And let's start off with talking about why you might want to track your basal body temperature. So in conjunction with my programme, I really like to start off by getting you to track your basal body temperature, getting you to understand your fertility cycle. For those of you who aren't already aware of any fertility issues that you may have, it may highlight some, it may make it really clear why you haven't already fallen pregnant. For those of you that haven't got any fertility issues, as far as you know, you're just looking to conceive as healthily as possible, then this will just highlight getting you to understand your body a little bit better, getting you to understand the days of the month that you can conceive. And when we're looking at when it's best to have intercourse and to look to conceive your baby, we want to be looking at which day of the month is the best, because we want that to be a really healthy and fresh egg that is being fertilised. Will likely to produce a healthier baby than an egg that's been hanging around for 2 or 3 days and we just managed to fertilise it at the last minute before it dies and is shed. So what I have got for you is your fertility chart, which is attached to the email and looks like this. It's an adaptation of the one in Taking Charge of Your Fertility. I've simplified it down a little bit because they ask you to record an awful lot and it can be a bit daunting. Equally, you might not want to use a paper chart. It's a little bit old school, and you might be wanting to use one of the apps that there are links for, or you might be wanting to be using one of the online services, or just leave the chart on your computer and you can just do it straight on the screen. Whatever works for you, it really doesn't matter. It really doesn't make any difference. I'm going to show you on the paper, mostly just because it's easier for the video, but it will look the same whether you chart online, on an app, or on paper. Yeah. So you've got across the top of the chart, you've got the days of the month, and this is not the date. This is the day of your cycle, and day 1 of your cycle is the first day of your period. So it's the day that you're bleeding. So for day 1, 2, 3, probably 4, 5, maybe a little bit longer for some of you, the temperature should be fairly steady and will be at the lower end of your BBT, because as we're going to look at in a minute, you have a dip in your basal body temperature, which is what signals that your body is ready to shed that uterine lining to bleed and to have your period. Yeah. So you have got then time that your temperature is taken. Now, when you are charting your basal body temperature, you need to take it at about the same time every day. Yeah, you can have a variance of about half an hour, but even on the weekend when you're having a lie-in, if you normally get up at 7 o'clock in the morning, then try and take your basal body temperature at 7. Even if you then go back to sleep, that's fine. But if you have a variance of, let's say, 2 hours on a weekend, then it will really throw your temperature off and you know that you'll have a screwy day. If you happen to have just slept through and you haven't taken your temperature because you just needed a rest, or you got up really, really early in the morning, then just record that. And pretty much when you're looking at your chart, don't take that day too seriously, because if you've taken it with either more than half an hour's variance either side, so if it's 7 o'clock in the morning, you could take it from 6:30 or up to 7:30. But if you took it at 9:30, it's probably not going to be worth a lot. So just be aware of that. Yeah. The next box down is about the discharge. It's a fun word. Lots of women always like it. Yeah, nice to talk about the discharge. But it is what we're looking at. Yeah. I'm going to come to this in a little bit more detail in a moment. I just want to talk to you about the temperatures. But basically, you're just recording what's coming out. Yeah, so for those first few days, 1, 2, 3, probably 4, maybe 5, and maybe even a little bit longer, it's going to be blood. Yeah, that's what you're going to be recording there. And then as we go further down, you can see that you've got lots and lots of temperatures. coming down the chart, and it's basically just to highlight what your temperature was. So I've put the range of human norm, and hopefully your temperature isn't too much lower or too much higher. If it's too much higher, we're starting to head into fever, and you're probably poorly. Go take yourself to the doctors. And if it's too much lower, then there might be something else going on, and again it might well be an underlying health condition that's good to talk through with a healthcare professional of one type or another. So we're going from 35.5 up to 37.4. The normal range for most people is somewhere from 36-ish up to about 37 is the normal range within a fertile cycle. You might find off that you start off a little bit lower than 36 and that you end up a little bit higher, but see what the range is for you. And then the final box down at the bottom is just for any notes. So you can include in there any changes to diet or lifestyle. If you went out and got really drunk one night, then you might want to pop that down because alcohol will increase your basal body temperature. So again, you might want to not pay too much attention to that temperature the next day. If you ran a marathon, then you might want to include that in because again, you can expect that to affect your basal body temperature. Any changes in medication? Any day that you start a medication or finish a medication, because again that can change temperature. Any procedures, so if you are going through a fertility treatment, then you might want to record the day that you took a certain drug or actually went and had IVF or IUI or whatever it is that you're using, and any illness, because again we know, don't we, that if you're poorly you take your temperature and it's a sign of whether you're well or ill. So again, just make sure that you're recording that. Yeah. So in a normal cycle, as I say, we tend to start off on the lower end. That day one of your cycle, expect that to be one of the lowest temperatures that you'll have in the month. And then you're going to be charting through for the days that you're bleeding. Now, most women will ovulate. So if we talk about a standard cycle being about 28 days in length, then you would expect to ovulate somewhere around day 14 of your cycle. But when we're simply charting basal body temperature alone, the spike in temperature tends to happen about 24 hours after you ovulate. So if you're looking to conceive, then if that temperature has spiked, your body has already released the egg. You've already ovulated. And you could try for a quickie to see if you can get it in with the egg there, but it's probably better to have had sex a day before, so there's nice healthy sperm waiting for that egg, yeah? So this is why we also talk about charting cervical mucus, which I'm going to come back to in a moment. Some people notice over 2, 3, 4 months of charting their cycle that they actually have a dip in temperature again on the day that they ovulate. If you're lucky enough to do that, to have that heads up every month, then fantastic. Do that and make sure that you have intercourse on that day, because it will increase your chances of conceiving. But it's not that common. Most people just have the temperature rise a day or so after they ovulate. So don't worry too much, but it can just be a handy heads up. And then the temperature will stay high for the remainder of the cycle after you have ovulated. And if you have a straightforward cycle, you'd start off with your low temperature, have that increase somewhere around day 14, day 15, maybe if you ovulate on day 14, for the temperature to go up to show ovulation, and then it will stay high. And if you haven't conceived, then it would come back down again on day 28, and that would signify to you that you were going to start menstruating that day, that your period was going to come that day. Yeah, and you're back to day 1 of your next cycle. So that's what you look for in a very typical cycle. But do be aware that there is real variances. So some people will find that their cycle starts day 1 and then that they ovulate day 11. Now that might be why there might be some struggle to conceive, that if you ovulate very early, your womb lining isn't actually thick enough for the egg to implant. So that can be something that we can hope to change with that improvement in lifestyle, and look to move that on, which is why we want to chart the BBT. Even for those of you who know that you aren't ovulating, know that you've got fertility issues, why we want to be charting your fertility cycle at the same time as doing the program is so that we can notice that if you start taking a particular oil or changing a particular supplement or adding something or taking something away from your diet or a certain meditation or whatever is actually affecting your cycle, that's what you want to do more of. Yeah, that's so you can start to understand what is positive changes that you're implementing and what changes might be affecting you on some level but isn't affecting you on it within your fertility cycle. Yeah, so that's what we're looking to address. Some people will find that they ovulate much later, and that will slightly increase the chances of conception, because then you've got a really nice thick juicy womb lining ready for the egg to go in. So if you know that you have a longer cycle on average, that can be a positive, although it depends why, and it's what else is going on in your cycle. But some women will find that they ovulate on day 28, on day 17 of a 28-day cycle, and they actually have a much shorter gap between ovulation and menstruation. Yeah. So it's just to get to know your cycle, what it looks like for you. Now, in the book that I linked on, Taking Charge of Your Fertility, she does explain that for most women, the first bit of your cycle between the first day of your period, first day of menstruation, and ovulation is the bit of the cycle that can vary. So if you are poorly in that time, expect for ovulation to be later. If you run a marathon, expect for ovulation to be later. If you have something that frightens you or is quite an extreme circumstance, so I think it's in there that she tells the story of a woman living through an earthquake. No, not a major one. I think she lived somewhere like San Francisco where they experience earthquakes quite often, but certainly enough to disturb her sleep and probably upset her on some kind of hormonal level, and she ovulated much later that month. So there can be some variance in that first part of the cycle, but the second part of the cycle from ovulation to menstruation should be fairly fixed. And so some women will find that that's a very clear 14 days every month, 14, 14, 14. And some women will find that that might be a little bit longer, that actually they might, as I say, ovulate on day 11, but then not menstruate till day 28. Or they might ovulate a little bit later, ovulate on day 17, day 18, and then only have 10 days, 11 or 10 days until they menstruate. If you have 18 high days in a row, then it's quite likely that you're pregnant, and it's worth doing a pregnancy test to see if that's what's causing those high days. It is partly why we include the other little bits at the bottom, because if you're suddenly poorly, if you've had a change in medication, etc., that might be what's delaying the period. But on the whole, if there's nothing else going on and you've had 18 high days, then it's quite likely that you're pregnant. So do be aware of that. And some women, if you've been trying to conceive for a long time and you know that you're spending the best part of £10 every month on pregnancy tests only to have your period come the next day, wait until you've had 18 high days and only take your pregnancy test when you've had 18 high days, just to save you a little bit of money. Although if you buy online they're cheaper, but you know, by the by, wait until you've had those 18 high days. Yeah. Now, some of you will notice that your cycle just doesn't do that. Some of you may already be aware that you're not ovulating, or you may not be aware, but the cycle highlights that you're not ovulating. Some degree of anovulation, a cycle without ovulation, is quite normal within anybody's fertility time period. But if you're having it every month, then we know that that's the underlying issue. You may already be aware that that's the underlying issue, and the chart will look a little bit more random. You won't have that very clear dip, going down low, high, staying up high, dip, you know, which is what you expect to see in a standard fertility cycle. Yours will kind of bob along at about the same rate every month. So just being aware of that, but again, seeing if any of the changes that we implement do make a difference, do help increase that temperature, do help with the fertility at all. So it's still a good idea to track your cycle. So the other area that we want to look at is the discharge, the cervical mucus, looking at what's coming out. Because as I say, for most people, the temperature increases after they ovulate. It's not the best thing if you're trying to conceive, because you're, as I say, it would already be after your egg is released that your temperature's gone up, and we want to be having sex on the day that your egg is released so that there's a nice fresh egg with some nice fresh sperm making a really healthy baby. Yeah. So to do that, we have a look at the cervical mucus, and you might notice, you might already be aware yourself of a change within your cervical mucus. So for a lot of women, we start off with blood at the beginning of the cycle, and then it will go to being quite thin and watery. It might even feel a little bit dry or a little bit sticky. That tends to be more towards the end of the month, but it's possible to have that earlier in the month on days when you're not fertile. And then as you head closer and closer towards those fertile days, we expect that cervical mucus to go a little bit cloudy and to start to go a little bit stringier. And then on your most fertile days of the month, we actually expect it to go like egg white. I have some egg white here to show you. I promise you this is egg white. So you can see that kind of stringy consistency. Yeah? So that's kind of what you're looking for, is that when you get a little bit on your fingers, it should be stretching like that. Yeah, clear and stretchy like that. And what that means is that that is ripe and ready for the sperm to just swim straight through. As you can well imagine, if you've got really sticky, dry cervical mucus, the sperm's just going to get stuck in there. It's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to go anywhere near the uterus, anywhere near anything that's hanging around. It's just going to get stuck in there and then flushed out of your body. Whereas if you've got that lovely, wet, stretchy, clear cervical mucus, that's a clear alleyway for the sperm to be swimming through and reaching that egg nice and healthy and ready to fertilise. Yeah, so that's what you're looking for, is that change in your cycle. For women that don't ovulate, they might find that they're just a little bit moist for most of the cycle. They might find that they start to get that stringy, stretchy type of cervical mucus because there will still be an increase in estrogen as the body tries to ovulate, but it might just not be able to reach those peak amounts that actually allow the egg to be released. So just having a look at that cervical mucus and seeing what the body's trying to do. If there is some stringy, stretchy mucus, that's a good sign. The body is trying. It wants to try and release that egg. It wants to try and create a baby. So it is trying, it's going in the right direction. It's a positive thing. And hopefully throughout the programme, you'll find a couple of steps that will help tip it over, create that high enough estrogen to tip it over and actually release an egg ready to be fertilised. Yeah. Okay. I think that's everything that I wanted to talk to you about in regards to charting your basal body temperature and charting your cervical mucus. I know I said mucus so many times in my life, so I hope you enjoyed that. If there's any questions or queries, as ever, you're always welcome to contact me directly. I hope that's helpful. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.